Um, Welcome all the delegates present here for the first session of 17th International Conference on Apparel and Home Textiles hosted by OGTC. In this session, we will be listening to the presentations made by eminent speakers from apparel and home textile sector. This session will be chaired by Mr. PMS Uppal, President OGTC. It is my pleasure to welcome you, sir. And although we know you all very well and you do not need any introduction, but still, I would like to share a very brief profile of yours with the delegates. Mr. Uppal is a visionary and founder president of OGTC, a cluster of garment manufacturing companies in National Capital Region of India. He is managing director of PM Pro Exports, which is part of a vertically integrated PM Pro group comprising of Himla embroidery and creative dyeing and printing works. The group has complete facilities for woven fabrics, right from dyeing and printing to finished garments. We welcome you once again, sir, on the behalf of OGTC. Our first speaker for the day is Ms. Ruby Ojha. Welcome you, Ms. Ruby. She is Regional Team Lead for South Asia ESG Department, International Finance Corporation. She is a Senior Environmental and Social Development Specialist and Regional Team Leader for South Asia in Environment, Social and Governance Department of International Finance Corporation. She has more than 22 years of work experience and has worked extensively on assessing E&S risk and designing mitigation measures. I extend a very, very warm welcome to you, Ms. Ruby. Thanks for joining us. I now hand over to Mr. Uppal to take over conference proceedings. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. And thanks, Ms. Ruby, for being here. Really looking forward, as Prashant just spoke about manufacturing excellence. And I think in today's world, we cannot look at one particular area and try to build a country or an organization or a social structure. Today, it's everything included. So every subject is very important. We are all keen to hear you. Your subject seems to be very, very interesting, very depth, and this is what the world is talking about today. So over to you, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Ashma, for the introduction. Thanks, sir. And I'd really like to thank the team to give me this opportunity to be able to come here and talk about sustainability in the fashion value chain. I have a small presentation and I'd like to share that. Let me just open my screen. Just let me know if it's clearly visible. I hope the presentation is clear to everyone. Okay, so let me just start. So I'm here to talk about the impact of changing ESG requirements on the fashion value chain. As Sir just said, that ESG is something that applies to each and everything. And so fashion industry is something that also has the ESG has a relevance in the fashion value chain as well. And I'm going to talk about that. In my presentation, I'll start with some basics about sustainability, which you must be knowing, but I thought it may be better to start that way. And then I would talk about some specifics into the fashion industry, what are the relevant ESG issues. And then I have picked up a couple of case studies, very simple case studies, just to showcase that what are the different ways in which we can look at sustainability in the fashion value chain. With that, let me first start with the beginning, that what is sustainability? In the common definition that you would have heard is that sustainability is the ability to meet the current needs without compromising on the needs of a future generation. In business terms, now that we are talking here in terms of business, what does it really mean? So it means that one should be able to ensure the business success while at the same time contributing towards economic and sustainable development and a healthy environment. So sustainability basically has four key pillars: human angle, social, environmental, and economic. And it implies that people, planet, and profits walk hand in hand. So that's the ultimate purpose of sustainability. Sometimes, it may sound synonymous with what we call as corporate social responsibility, with corporates investing towards sustainable measures and towards making sure that they are fulfilling the role of doing a socially responsible act. So how is sustainability achieved? It's achieved through good governance, through fair treatment of employees, and by making sure that the environmental impacts and the impacts on communities are well dealt with. So that's how sustainability can be achieved. Now, one question that would be there in minds of people is that, okay, sustainability is fine, but how do I relate it with financial performance? Will my financial performance get impacted if I'm focusing more on sustainability? So if you look at here, some of the, the findings from the leading banks, Harvard Business School, Deutsche Bank, Barclays and all. So they have, kind of done some exercises and arrived at this conclusion that integrating ESG into the investment business decisions actually yields in greater performance. So in the next slide, you'll see that I'm showcasing a graph here. So this was a study that was done by Harvard in the year 2011. They basically took up two group of companies, and the companies, of course, in order to compare two set of companies, they need to be really similar in the nature. So these group of companies were almost identical in size, with the same capital structure and almost a similar kind of parameters. And if you look at the graph here, this is the data which is presented on the financial performance of these two companies. So the company with the stronger ESG performance also fared higher in terms of financial performance. So so just wanted to present this case. And then adding a little more context as to how sustainability adds value. So firstly, it guards against unforeseen risk and impact. And as you all know, that if the impacts and risks are not properly taken care at the time, let's say any industry is coming up, any industry is establishing itself, then later it may come as a surprise and throw things out of the gear. So it's very important to be aware of what could be the possible risks and impacts. And I'll get to that, that later on, what exactly are the risks and impacts. Improves financial and operational performance. So we talk about that in the previous slide where I showed us a graph showing how better ESG results in better financial performance. Also, it protects the investment against negative media attention, which could be, of course, be a big reputational risk. All of us would have seen in the media, in the newspaper, or in the TV articles about different things where the industries have not focused well on sustainability or ESG matters, and NGOs have either picked it up or governments have picked it up. They've got show cause notice, or there has been some adverse media attention. Integrating sustainability also provides the social license to operate. When I say social license to operate, it means it generates greater acceptability from the communities. So people support the project, and there is no opposition because all those things are well integrated into the project itself. And so I talk on behalf, I work with International Finance Corporation. So I'm talking about international standards and why they are more relevant. And I mean, I'm not saying the national standards are not relevant, but the matter of a fact is that international standards actually provide a stamp of approval. I mean, all the lenders, more or less, all the lenders adopt the same international standards. And of course, which would result in access to capital. Now, again, through this diagram, if you see that, we're trying to demonstrate why is sustainability rewarding. In the center is what you see is the company, and then there are different stakeholders like community, the employees, the government, NGOs, media, clients, all sort of stakeholders are there. What if sustainability is not taken care of properly? So these are the impacts that would occur, which is loss of operating license, people not supporting a project, strike by the employees not happy with the company, NGOs launching their own campaigns, media leading into negative publicity, boycott, and then also ultimately leading in financial impacts as well. And what if it's the opposite, that if sustainability is properly integrated, then it's just the opposite, that it results in operating license, retention of the employees, cooperation from NGOs and media, and ultimately also financial gains. So this is just a quick on why is sustainability rewarding. Now, as I said in the beginning, ENS sustainability is not specific to a sector. It applies to all sectors. And what does IFC do in that regards is that IFC helps the clients understand and manage the ENS risk, and helps them devise mitigation measures so that they are, one, of course, compliant with the national standards, but also compliant with the international standards. And I'll talk a bit after this slide on what exactly are the international standards that I'm going to talk of. IFC's ESG policies are widely accepted, and as I said, most of the lenders follow these standards. We also partner with the clients. We consider our clients as partners, and we work with them to find innovative solutions which are both ESG rewarding. So this is the scope of services that IFC offers to its clients. And also wanted to mention that IFC has several investments in the RMG sector, the ready-made garment sector in various countries. And if I speak of South Asia, because I work mostly in South Asia, we have investments in India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, largely in the RMG sector. So now I'm going to talk a bit about the international standards that I mentioned of in the beginning. So IFC has a sustainability policy in place, and also what we call as our performance standards. And I'll talk later on what are these 8 performance standards, but just to say that sustainability is very important component in IFC, and we have lots of policies and procedures in place, just like any other company would have. So our sustainability policy defines our commitments towards sustainability, and then of course it touches on various cross-cutting issues like human rights, ecosystems, genders, low carbon, climate change. And the way it articulates the risk mitigation hierarchy is that it mentions that the first step is to avoid impact. So one should always look at how could I avoid the impact. If that's not possible, the next step is to minimize the impacts. If even that's not possible, then the last step is to compensate for the impacts that you are occurring in. And so, we work with our clients whenever we are investing in any of the projects. We apply this mitigation hierarchy, and we make sure that we try to avoid impacts, and then try to mitigate if that's not possible. In terms of the international standards that I spoke of, we have what we call as IFC performance standards, and there are 8 standards. And each of the performance standard touches on a particular thematic area. So PS1, what is the assessment and management of ENS risk and impacts? This is like an umbrella performance standard for us, because it touches upon something that is relevant to each and every sector. So the theme of the PS1 is assessment and management of ENS risk and impacts. Only when we have assessed and identified the ENS risk will we be able to address that. So this is something that applies to all sectors. PS2 is specific to labor and working conditions, which again is quite relevant to most of the sectors, certainly to the fashion industry as well. PS3 is resource efficiency and pollution prevention. So addressing issues like emissions, wastewater, waste management. PS4 is community health and safety. So if we have communities living nearby a project area, and they getting impacted by the project, whether it's because of emissions coming from the project or because of certain discharges or because of noise coming from the factory. There could be various reasons. This performance standard touches on that particular aspect. PS 5, 6, 7, 8 may be relevant to certain projects, but may not be relevant to all projects. And the reason why I say that is that PS5 pertains to land acquisition. Let's say we are looking at a brownfield expansion in an industrial area where land has been in possession. It's not, there is no direct purchase of land from people. It's not impacting, there's no physical or economic displacement. So then this performance standard does not apply. Similarly, in that case, there's no impact on biodiversity. It's not located in a biodiversity reserve. It's not impacting any of that or any of the indigenous people. So then PS 5, 6, 7, and 8 is actually cultural heritage, does not apply. But PS 1 to 4 is what we see typically applying to most of our investments. And certainly these would also apply to the RMG sector. Now, having talked about sustainability in general and having talked about what does IFC do, what are the IFC's performance standards, let me get slightly into the sector specific. So what are the ENS issues that are relevant to the ready-made garment sector? Although it seems like there might not be many, but let's look at what could be the various relevant issues, and I'll talk from the perspective of different PSS. So let's say PS2, which is labor and working conditions. What are the aspects that are relevant here? So labor and working conditions, how the payment of fair wages, overtime hours, compensation for overtime hours that people work on, workers' accommodation, then occupational health and safety, freedom of association and collective bargaining. This is, again, these are very relevant issues in the RMG sector. People having the freedom to join a union if they want to. So these are the aspects that we'll look into. PS3, like pollution prevention, there is usage of dyes, generation of wastewater, how that wastewater is treated and handled, resource efficiency, then generation of use of hazardous materials and waste management. These are some of the relevant things here. Then life and fire safety. So that's again very, very relevant in terms of what is done on life and fire safety and GHG emissions. So these are some of the ENS issues that are relevant. And in the next one, the next slide, what I've tried to show is that what are the sustainability impacts on the apparel retail supply chain. And, I've taken all the 4 stages. So first is the raw material sourcing stage, raw material impacts. Cotton is largely used. And if you, I've just taken some figures based on the data that has been published by through research done on various things. So to produce 1 kilogram of cotton lint, it takes roughly 5.5 gram of pesticide and 13.5 cubic meters of water. So you see how resource intensive it is. And then, of course, pesticide usage having its own set of indirect impacts. When we come to processing, again, in processing means we will be using dyes here. So to dye a kilogram of fiber, it takes 80 to 100 liters of water. And of course, if this wastewater is not treated properly, then there would be chemicals discharged with the water. And not to mention that, of course, there will be use of non-renewable energy to do all of that, and which ultimately results in GHG emissions. When we move to the usage impacts, so clothing usage phase can contribute more than 80% of the energy used in its life cycle. And of course, there is energy usage, washing of clothes, changing the washing temperature, use of drying the clothes, washing the clothes, all that is again resource intensive. And end of the life impact is the clothing, when it's get discarded, so it would eventually end up in the landfill. And then once it decomposes, there would be generation of GHG emissions. So if you see here, at all the stages, there are one or the other environmental impacts related.
Sorry, Ms. Ruby, for interrupting you in between. We request you to please conclude your presentation. We have the next speaker in queue, please.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you so much.
No problem. So, maybe I'll just skip through some of the slides, which again, mention about the different variety of ESG solutions. I just wanted to very quickly mention about some of the initiatives that IFC is involved in, and I would just name them in the interest of time. So there's a Better Works program, which is done in coordination with the International Labour Organization. Their gender initiatives, the initiatives on improving life and fire and building safety. There's also a program called the Global Trade Supplier Finance Program, and then the Partnership for Cleaner Textiles, which focuses on improving efficiency practices to reduce water, energy, and chemical use. And then these are my last set of slides. I just picked up a couple of examples where we can see that how sustainable measures are integrated. So one is where it's an eco-friendly clothing line where no harmful chemicals or child labor or on any hazardous operations are undertaken. Then there's another one which uses discarded fabrics, uses eco-friendly materials. And then another one which promotes khadi and making handmade and naturally dyed products. This is another one where I was going to talk about the example of how gender-based violence and harassment in the garment sector has been addressed. And then, of course, about Levi's and how they've developed monitor system for rating the environmental and social performance, not just for them, but for their suppliers as well. And then they basically assign a rating to the suppliers. So that's all that I had to talk about. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to answer if there are any questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby, for being here. Quite an interesting one. Sustainability is the way for the world to go forward. And I think the way it's going on, there's no stopping into the whole process. Sustainability should not come to the industry or people in large out of fear. It should come to them as an obligation, what they can do. We see a lot of issues where the world talks about it, depending on certain countries, depending on certain ways they don't seem to be practical in the short term, but could be a possibility in the long term. So I personally feel that we need to have a program for the Indian textile and garment industry on sustainability, which could be short term, medium term, and long term. Certainly, a lot of things that you've shown are already in process as far as the Indian industry is concerned. We do have very strict laws within the country that are followed. In most of the cases, maybe not in some, but how we can bring this sustainability as a knowledge factor within the industry would be great. We certainly will take out time after the conference and take this forward with you. And thank you for all the efforts and your speaking today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for the concluding remarks. And thank you, Ms. Ruby, for such an excellent presentation, what is need of the hour. I thank all the delegates present here and request you all to please join our next session by clicking the tab on your screen. Thank you so much. We end the session here.